quick introduction. So I'm Jason Evans. I'm the Sales and Marketing Director here at Atik. I cover, as it sounds, all sales and marketing activities across the business, which encompasses not only the Atik Cameras brand, but also the QSI and Opus Instruments brands as well. And these are both scientific, astronomical, and then under Opus, our art conservation range. In terms of what we're looking to cover off today, we'll do a brief introduction on sort of the concept of customization or collaborative customization. And we'll also look at the key considerations that you might need to make, covering sensors, mechanical, electronics, and then more onto the firmware software side as well. We'll touch a little bit on facilities and any requirements you might have there. We'll run through a few case studies, and then we'll get straight into a bit of a wrap up and a Q&A as well. So moving straight in, collaborative customization. Well, it is hopefully roughly as it sounds. Bespoke cameras for a lot of people are genuinely the only way of ensuring you get what you need and you get what you want. Far too often people might be adjusting the wrong things to shoehorn something in, and as a result, let's say you might have a box and you want to put a camera inside of it, and you can only get a camera off the shelf which is bigger than the box. So what do? You make your box bigger to accommodate it. Where collaborative customization or going down that bespoke route will hopefully enable you to get something that fits into what you want it to fit into, rather than having to compromise so much elsewhere. It allows you control of the process, or certainly greater control and involvement, to make sure that you get exactly what you need. And when done right, it can give you better access to R&D teams to help make sure that the whole process, nose to tail, is much smoother than it otherwise would be. You can often go down pathways where you'll have email interactions, phone calls, and it might just be with one person, and you might get one set of criteria across. But if you have more of that collaborative element, then you are much more likely to have instances where, say, problems might be uncovered earlier, other aspects you might not normally have thought of get covered, and as a result, you have a much more enjoyable and successful experience as a result. So, if we dive straight in, key considerations. So the sensor is obviously going to be one of the biggest considerations you make when selecting a camera. Now, in terms of technologies, it's very much, where do you begin? CCD, CMOS, InGaAs, MCT, as it's becoming a little bit more prevalent. There are oodles of options, and each have their own benefits and equally their own pitfalls. We're not going to go into huge amounts of detail on that today. We did a presentation about 2 months ago on CCD versus CMOS. If that's something that's of interest, please do pop us an email. You should be able to access the recording of that, and also the white paper that went along with that as well. But that's going to drive heavily how your initial search for a camera might go. So what are you looking for? Where are you looking for it? And what do you actually want to achieve? What are you taking an image of? That will give you a quick steer down, certainly which broad technology you go for. But then within that, you start to then pick out more fine details. So as the second point notes, depending on the application, you might have quite a wide variety of suitable sensors that look like they might do the job. Equally, there might only be one if it's really niche. But as you go through that process, you should hopefully be able to start to narrow down some of those specifications a bit more, depending on what you're trying to achieve. So longer exposures might need deeper wells. You might want bigger pixels. You might want faster frame rates, which are more commonly associated with CMOS these days. So lots of things will help to start narrow down that selection process. And then obviously you've got some key aspects in terms of price. A lot of people, not only from the sensor, but the whole camera will obviously be quite sensitive to pricing, performance, what you want to achieve, which we sort of touched on, but then also prestige. Some people might want a sensor from a specific brand. In certain instances, that brand might carry more weight. There might be more history, there might be more pedigree. With that might also come more price. But equally, those are considerations that when you're designing a product and understanding who your, let's say, your market is, who your target customer is, what application it's for, all of those things start to come into that picture. And as a result, the sensor is often going to be one of those first questions that you ask: what do I need, and how do I need it to operate for my application? Next up, we've got mechanical. So unfortunately, the before and after is not going to work with the way we've had to load the presentation in shortly. But many people will require cameras that go into a variety of systems and have potentially quite specific space constraints. So as a result, you may need something which is completely from the ground up designed to fit into a small enclosure, be that short and fat or long and narrow. There's all sorts of options available to everyone when they start to investigate that route. So you've selected your sensor. Now you need to understand what are the dimensions available to me with my current specification or my current box, let's say. And as a result, what do I want that to look like when it comes down to my system and how it integrates and interacts. Now, the image we've got here, the before and after, well, the after was a completely adjusted faceplate that allows for better integration onto a mounting system. So a very simple change in principle, but one that needs to be quite heavily thought out, not only to make sure that the camera can still operate in the way it's designed and the way it's required, but that it also meets all of the various tolerances and mounting principles that come with a specific system. So a bespoke design, that collaborative aspect, can help to make sure that these aspects are all covered off. One thing that we will often not necessarily think about when looking at a mechanical view of a camera is that we will need to put wires into it. So we need a connection for data. We need a power connection. How does our box fit those in? Do we have it coming out directly? Do we have them coming out on a 90? Do we need them on the side? Simple things which, when we look at a camera, can often be a secondary thought, but need to be thought about relatively early on in that process. Otherwise, suddenly we're trying to put something into our space and realize that we actually needed an extra couple of centimeters more than we realized. So when it comes to designs, you might be thinking about adapters, modifying parts, complete case designs, but getting those things specified and understood up front can help to take away those headaches at a later date, and also can make the process of selecting or finding a camera much more straightforward. The reason being, again, that as long as you know what you want to achieve and potentially what sensor you want to use, you might have found a camera and then lamented that it's not going to fit in the space you have available. But with that customization aspect, you can rest a little safer knowing that there's a good chance something can be changed and adjusted to make the space work properly. Moving on to, let's say, the guts of the camera, into the electronics. So when it comes to what you want to achieve and the specifications you've got, you've picked your sensor, you know the envelope you've got available, but equally, how do you want it to operate? What kind of connectivity do you want? Do you need GigE? Do you need USB? Do you need other lines coming in and out? These are all, again, things that you're probably going to know up front. You'll have quite a lot of it spec'd out. But then you need to start thinking about how you're going to interact with your system. What additional levels of functionality are you going to have? Do you need fast interactions with your lighting sources, electrical stimulation? Do you need a trigger line in, a trigger line out, a general purpose input output, so GPIO there, will enable a number of these things. And more often than not, it's relatively straightforward to make those kind of changes. But again, it's a lot more straightforward to make them when you're going through that initial process of mapping out what you need and understanding how that might be delivered and how it fits into your system. So again, these are the kind of considerations that as you build up that picture and start to understand what and how you might utilize a camera and how that features and fits within your system, that you can start to implement those accordingly. Slightly more tenuously based into the electronics, but more because it fits into this kind of package, we look at things like cooling as well. Do you need a vacuum seal? Are O-rings sufficient? Will gas backfilling be sufficient? Do you need Peltier, so thermoelectric cooling, heat sinks, fans? Again, things which then will link quite closely back into the mechanical aspect. So how much space do you need? Do you have integrated cooling in this box that you're designing? And as a result, can you strip that out of the camera? As a result, potentially saving cost as well. So as you build up this list, this specification, all these aspects will then start to help steer what you need and how you want it that little bit further. Firmware and software. So firmware is obviously the element that's loaded in on the camera, and how the camera works, takes the image, processes it, and then sends it out to the computer or the integrated system that you're using. It can be customized, obviously, to ensure that it's perfect for what you need. There's generally always going to be a baseline specification in terms of how firmware is going to operate a camera. That needs to underpin its general functionality, but saying that, the firmware aspect can be tweaked. It can be updated and adjusted to make sure that it runs in a way you need it. In one recent example, actually from this summer, the camera you see on screen, the Asus, we have a customized version of this camera going to a customer, and they wanted to use the camera for one very specific application. They don't want it to be adjusted. They don't want it to be doing different things. It is highly focused. As a result, they know what settings they want. They know the level of sensitivity. And because of this, we have then enforced on the camera specific binning, gain, cooling. Most of those smaller settings, which you can tweak and adjust and play with, have all been fixed. As a result, they'll get a camera, they'll get it out of the box, connect it up, and it does exactly what they need it to do. There is no additional settings that need playing with before they can connect it up and integrate. So it might seem like something small, but when you might be scaling up or using cameras in volume, the ability to control those aspects might mean simple time savings, like reduction of adjustments on a production line, but it could be more complex down the line, that it helps to prevent anything adjusting in a system, measurements changing, settings or readings changing. And as a result, when it goes through in certain applications where you need a high level of precision, you've got certification where you want consistency, repeatability, reproducibility. Those things can become ever more important. You know, if you're getting CE marking, FDA clearance, those kind of things, obviously they are documented to, well, to heaven and back again. So you want everything to be as perfect as possible. And then in those instances, those kind of subtle changes can make quite a big difference. Right, firmware and software continued. So this side on the software, so more what's happening after or as your image or data is leaving the camera. Now, in this instance, I'd certainly hope, but in the Atik example, we provide the ability to develop software further to, again, suit your needs, to make sure that the cameras can be used more easily long after they've been installed in a system. For most of our, certainly, OEM customers who are integrating cameras into their systems, we operate an SDK, as most people will do. And this, in short, enables customers to fully integrate a camera, again, into that box. So most instances of OEM systems, platforms, instruments will have a box which is taking an image, and inside will have some form of computing power processing, so that when they then output from their system, it is an output which they want to control, to have, be it their logos, their programming, their software, all of those things that interacts with the end user. So what we enable is our cameras to fully integrate into that system. So from an Atik perspective, we disappear into the background. We are very simply a a piece of the puzzle, a cog in the whole system. And we want to make sure that people have the ability to create custom software packages, integrations that work for them. And certainly for ourselves anyway, we always look to try and help facilitate that as best as possible, because it's important for you to be able to integrate a system and a solution in a way that works for you and has the right level of visibility for you and your customer as well. You don't necessarily want your customer to be plugging your instrument into a computer and suddenly up pops a load of Atik information. You want it to be focused on your brand, your product, and either the solution or the message that you're trying to portray. So going hand in hand with firmware, but obviously playing potentially quite a different role, it's the ability to, again, customize, bespoke, and through collaboration, find something that works for you and make sure that it's fine-tuned for what you need and how you need to use it. In terms of facilities, this is weirdly still a key consideration. I've not put it down quite as such for one reason that, again, it's always going to depend on your application, what you're trying to achieve. If you're looking to get, again, using FDA as an easy, well-known example, FDA clearance for a product, and you need to know that to a certain level on your bill of materials, that everything is done to a standard, more often than not, at least an ISO 9001 quality standard, then facilities do become quite important. As a result, most people will want the products they're buying, the cameras that are being made for them, to be made in a high quality environment to a high quality standard. So what you want to look for, and again, to work with your camera manufacturer in these instances, is to make sure that the work they're doing for you is being done to the level you need it to be done. Equally, if being done in a clean room to whichever standard it might be that you're after isn't important, then again, that can be specified up front. It might then relax certain tolerances. It might have an impact on cost. It might have an impact on timeframes or the ability to produce things at a high rate. But again, it's a consideration which enables you to help not necessarily control the process, but influence it in a way that can be positive for both you as a customer, as a buyer, as a user of technology, as well as the person who is helping to facilitate and make that technology for you. So it might seem like a bit of an afterthought, and it certainly will feature a lot further down the list than the things we've already covered, but it's still quite an important aspect to address and understand for most people as well. So moving on to some of the case studies and some easy examples for us to use. So obviously these are going to be Atik focused, but we'll hopefully demonstrate some really simple considerations that can make life easier when it comes to finding the right solution for you. So as we see on screen at the moment, the PCB series. So in this instance, we realized quite early on that people, again, have a need for either slimline solutions or cameras that can fit into compact spaces. Equally, cooling isn't necessarily always essential for someone. Casings, housings, all of that might be viewed as extra. Certainly when you're using a PCB level camera, you're less likely to have the kind of cooling that you'll often find with full housed, vacuum sealed, or certainly backfilled as well, imaging chambers, which enable proper TE cooling to work effectively. So again, these kind of considerations come in. With this example, we had customers who were basically looking for the cameras we already provided, but just wanted us to strip everything back and get a very simple solution, which they were able to incorporate into their system. Obviously, they understood the implications of removing the cooling and the impact that could have on imaging performance, but the way they were utilizing it enabled them to get exactly what they wanted in the way they wanted. Really important, but fortunately, it was a project that worked out really well, and as a result, led us down the route of opening up our product range to be able to be PCB'd, so to speak, for that full product portfolio. So It's an easy way for people to discover a product they might want. And again, through processes like this, events like this, we then can highlight that just because you found a camera that you thought was going to suit, but it's in a case, so you can't buy it, it's not going to be suitable for your application. Well, actually think we can adjust this, we can tweak it, and we can find a way to use it in a way that's meaningful and useful. Another good case study from this year is on our VS series. So we have been working with a number of customers who are involved in PCR instruments, which have obviously, as I'm sure many of you will be aware, been used in the fight against COVID, so for COVID testing specifically. The pandemic somewhat jumped up on everyone and ramped up a little bit quicker than everyone expected and hoped, perhaps. And as a result, the demand for PCR machines went from a level to obviously something on a different planet. As part of that, we worked closely with customers to help design, again, something that was fit for their specific purposes. This was taking a combination of existing products, adapting them with other products to pull together an adjusted VS series camera, in this instance, the VS 255 and 825, which, as the names indicate, we're using the Sony ICX 255 or 825 sensors. Now, these were, again, highly focused products, set to work in a very specific way, knowing that they were going to be used for a very specific purpose in PCR machines. So it enabled us to work with the customer to get something that was exactly what they needed, was able to fit into an existing envelope, and would perform in a very specific way. So we were absolutely delighted to be able to help with this effort, especially considering the current situation, and are obviously continue to be delighted that we're still working with these customers to help provide testing solutions into the world, and as a result are still having a positive impact on the fight against COVID. So it was something that we obviously weren't expecting, but using that mantra of collaborative customization, we were able to find a solution that has worked for everyone, and as a result have been able to hopefully make a meaningful impact. The P14. So this again is actually one of our older examples, one of the earlier ones that led us down the bespoke route, and is a tweaked, adjusted version of our Infinity camera as it was, for use in microbiology labs. In short, it was a series of very simple but important changes. So sensor change was one of the first things we implemented for them. Again, a very specific set of imaging parameters were laid out to us. Working with the customer, we then understood what sensor they needed and were able to make the changes accordingly. Equally, working with them, we were able to go through the envelope available, the mounting, how they were going to utilize the camera, what it was going to connect to, the distances involved, and as a result, some really simple changes. In this instance, just some extra threaded holes for mounting were able to be used for integrating the camera through. So it was a really simple change, but an absolutely fantastic one that was able to open this camera up for other people, and in this instance in the microbiology lab. And as I just spot a comment that's popped up saying the Infinity camera has changed the face of astrophotography. Absolutely, it was a step change on the astro side, and it was fantastic that because of that initial popularity that it had the additional level of visibility, which meant when this particular company stumbled across the Infinity, we were then able to start having those conversations about adjusting it for the future, and to find a version of it, in essence, that works specifically for them. So a really good example of how one thing can be adapted into another to find a new life, but more importantly, a new solution, an imaging solution at that, for a specific outcome. Moving on to the next slide. So hopefully not far off keeping to time, although obviously starting late. In summary, really, it's understanding those considerations of each product and each project. Sorry. So from both a requester, so let's say from a customer perspective, from someone who's either designing a system or a requirement, really understanding those key considerations and almost having it like a bit of a checklist is really important to essentially get what you need. If you know those specifications, if you have them detailed, if you have them mapped out, and you're able to run that through with someone during that collaboration process, it's only going to lead to both parties creating something that works best for everyone involved. As we've touched on, it goes through a whole host of different aspects, but ultimately we know the main focus is trying to find an imaging solution that meets a need. And as a result of that, certainly from an Atik perspective, we always want to work with customers to ensure that what we're providing is what they need. What we don't want to do, wherever possible, is sell something which is way over-spec'd, and in essence means someone is getting a lot more product than they actually want or need, and it's probably paying more for it as a result as well. We want to make sure people are paying for what they need, what they want, and what they're actually going to use. Almost equate it to sort of food in the world at the moment and excess waste. We want to reduce that level of waste to an extent, and certainly from an imaging perspective as well. So, moving on to the final slide. So thanks again, obviously, for your patience, and apologies again for the delay in getting up and running. Hopefully I've not whistled through everything a little too quickly. Fingers crossed everything's run through well. If you have any questions, obviously, please do submit them now as well. I'm sure Lewis will load anything up for me in a minute and send anything over. If you want to get in touch, please do get in touch via either our email, so contact@Atik is one of the easiest ways. We've got LinkedIn as well, and we've also got contact forms on our website where most of our products are all up and listed. If you're not already signed up onto our OEM newsletter, I'd recommend that as well. That's one of the best ways to get hold of the latest news, see when we've got more events coming up. Equally, if you have any suggestions or requests for future events, topics you might want us to cover, please do let us know, and we'll be sure to cover those as well for you. Moving on to some of the questions. So, can you customize products that you don't yet have, so prior to launch? Yes, I guess so. People will often come to us at the moment because of something that does exist. So it might be someone searching for a specific sensor or something along those lines, and as a result will fall onto our website. But that doesn't have to say that because a product isn't on our website yet or isn't visibly available, it doesn't mean that it can't be requested or that we can't work with someone to find a solution. So again, we'd definitely say don't be backwards in coming forwards, don't be shy. If there is a specific need that you have and it's not initially obvious that we or someone might have a solution available, ask the question. You'll never know until you double check on it. And certainly we've got a new camera coming out. Well, first production should be late January, a new CMOS camera. And we've not even launched that camera for people to utilize yet, but we've already got requests coming in to have bespoke customized versions of it. In some instances, it's, I say, something as simple as removing all the cooling, creating a more compact unit for industrial use. We've got others that might just want it in a board level format already, and some who might want other customization further down the line, which they're not entirely sure on yet. So this is a product that doesn't exist, isn't available to get your hands on as yet, but people are already asking that question of can we create bespoke versions of it. So in short, yes. Can we take functionality away from the camera so it's streamlined for our needs? Yeah, I suppose I touched on that a little bit just then. So absolutely, that's sort of a point I was hopefully trying to make earlier, in that if you have a camera that does everything, you will pay for everything. Even if you're only going to use that small 5–10% of it, you're still paying for that 100% that was designed in. Where possible, we want to provide people with solutions that are fit for purpose and that people are buying what they need to buy, not excessive amounts more. So again, using the example I mentioned a moment ago, we have a customer at the moment asking to strip cooling out of a camera. As a result, that's going to reduce the body size, that's going to reduce the need for fans, for other cooling elements that go into a camera, and in reality should reduce cost. So absolutely, if you want to pare something back, again, that's something to ask for upfront and to highlight, because it might have a positive impact, both from getting what you want, but also getting it at potentially a more effective price for you as well. R&D. So does access to the R&D team change depending on what needs to be customized? Yes, I suppose. So depending on what you need, to what level, depends on who you're likely to interact with through any particular process. If you're just after help integrating with an SDK, you're only going to need to integrate with a software team within R&D department. If you want to make wide-scale hardware changes or mechanical design changes, so case designs, etc., you're going to be going through to another department. If you're going bare bones, let's completely break something down and build it back up again, that's going to have a much wider involvement with an R&D team as well. So in those instances, you can go from zero to hero quite quickly, and as a result, that level of interaction will absolutely change. And it might change through the process as well. You may start with a few, move to a lot, and then pare that back as you go through as well. How big an impact on lead time does customization have? I want to say how long is a piece of string, but that would be mean. So what I will say is it really depends on how heavy the customization is. The reason being that if you're doing a lot of changes or need to make a lot of adjustments to get the right solution for you, the lead time impact is actually more in the initial design phase, so making all those tweaks and adjustments. Once something has been agreed and the design finalized, the lead times after that point are then all production related, and those tend to be a little bit more consistent. How long does it take to get metal work? How long might it take to get new boards? Those kind of things tend to be more even. So any changes are going to have similar impacts after that point. It all depends on the volume and the scale of the changes that you're making before that, which will impact the lead time. So making a small tweak, quite quick in the design, similar in the lead time on production, versus lots of change will obviously add many weeks potentially in that upfront stage. So that is always a good question to ask early on, and I might shoehorn that back into the presentation for another time, is lead time will absolutely be impacted. Work with the team, collaborate, understand what you're doing, and as a result, the potential impact it might have on lead times and how that fits in with your needs. Because again, it's all well and good if you go through that whole process only to find out that it's going to take 6 months longer than your startup project might have. And as a result, you're going to be behind on your deliverables. And as a result, that camera is no longer suitable or viable. And you might just need to use something off the shelf in the short-term period. So again, that is a really good question and a good consideration to have in quite early on. Okay, let's check. Any other questions coming in? I think that looks like all the ones that Lewis has sent over to me. If that's the case, unless anyone fires in, oh, there we go. Alan's just quickly squeezed in just before I said goodbye. So what proportion of your sales are custom cameras? Is that going to change when COVID is cured? OEM clients, let me Appreciate your standard cameras like the VS series, eventually with tweaks as you described for specific applications. What proportion? So I would say a large proportion of our cameras are custom, but in really varying levels. So we might have certain examples where the customization is really minimal, but as a result, it's not a standard off-the-shelf camera. The benefit that it does provide is that we will then maintain our standard cameras like the VS series that you mentioned. We will want to build on them. We should be releasing news in the next 2 months about a new CCD camera and sending out a bit more information to the market at that point. So we still want to design and create new new off-the-shelf cameras, let's say, but knowing full well that an off-the-shelf camera doesn't necessarily suit everyone's needs, and as a result might be tweaked. So as you say, with tweaks for specific applications. So what I don't want to go down the route of is saying we're only going to do bespoke, because you still need to have a good starting point to do bespoke from. So having that broad range of cameras across CCD, CMOS, and potentially InGaAs and other technologies is quite important for then being able to use as a baseline for creating new things as well. So in that instance, to quickly summarize, yes, we will have standard cameras still. Yes, those will then be available for adjustment and bespoke and tweaking. So don't be concerned. We will continue to invest in the standard as well as the bespoke. How long will CCD cameras be available? So for more in-depth on that topic, I would say have a look at the webinar from late August, or have a look on our YouTube channel as well. I think there's a bit of a conversation that I have with our MD, Steve Chambers, on the subject. In short, for on semi, stocks are what's left. As those gradually get depleted, those will run out. For Sony, those sensors should be around for at least another 6 or 7 years, potentially longer, depending on how quickly they get depleted. But there are other companies who have committed to the long-term future of CCD. One of those examples is E2V. Oh, looks like Lewis has put a YouTube link up. Thank you, Lewis. Is E2V. So E2V are providing CCD sensors into ground-based and space-based astronomy projects, scientific projects. As a result, they are investing further in the technology for 6-inch, 8-inch wafers, and are continuing to do so, which means they will be providing that technology for the foreseeable future. So I'm talking 10+ years, because space projects are hugely lengthy from conception to delivery, as I'm sure you can imagine. So in that sense, CCD will be around for a long time still. What it does mean is that it won't necessarily be as broadly available as it has been, with as many manufacturers going down that route. So I've probably given away a bit more information about the new camera that's to come. It will be an E2V CCD based camera that we'll be launching and bringing into production next year. But hopefully we'll have some more information on that before the end of this year, ideally. So any other questions to sneak in just before I wrap up? No, it looks like we might be okay. Right, in which case, thanks again, everybody, for your time. It's great to have you on and listening in, and it's very much appreciated. If you do have any other questions, please do feel free to get in touch, or in fact, I actively encourage it. It'd be great to hear from you, and also if you have any specific needs, then please do let us know as well. We would be delighted to try and work with anybody on any specific projects that you might have, and hopefully we can help anyone find a bespoke imaging solution for you. On that note, we will say thank you one more time. I hope for, well, depending on the time zones, we've got people from the US, from Asia, and from Europe. So depending on the time zone, I hope you have a rest of a good day. I hope you have a good night. I hope you have a good lunch. And I hope to see you on here again for one of our future events in the next month or so. Thanks very much.